Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you are doing good. Today I am bringing you a VR to Marlena Teresa, who made a video a little while back. I have no concept of time. I feel like it might have actually been about 3 days ago, who knows. But she made a video kind of talking through the process of figuring out like an everyday carry couple of decks, an everyday carry being a term borrowed from, I know it most from like the planner community. So my everyday carry, I've actually got like just over here, it's my Hobonichi 5 with my little extra notebook, and that's my journal EDC. So this is the tarot equivalent, and I thought it was a really interesting video. It was really interesting to see her talk through figuring out like what she wants in an everyday carry tarot and like the utility of it and all that kind of thing. And I decided that I would film a response because this is something that I actually think about quite often. I just never seem to have thought about in such explicit terms because at the moment I am in, that sounded ominous. At the moment I'm in a long distance relationship. The reason it's going to stop being long distance, it's not going to stop being a relationship, you know, touch wood. But I'm currently in a long distance relationship, and so I do a lot of travel, and because I'm more flexible than my partner is in terms of like scheduling, I do a lot of the traveling. And so I'm actually, tomorrow morning, I'm heading off for a week up to stay with them. And obviously tarot is a big part of my daily habits, daily routine. It's a thing that I do. So I need to take a deck or two, probably two realistically. Anyway, I need to take tarot with me. And this is a kind of conundrum I have with myself every time I'm going to stay for longer than a weekend. Because I'm like, well, I want a deck that I can use for like a week that I'm not going to get sick of. So I don't want it to be too like themed. I don't want it to be one that I'm working on as part of like a specific practice for something else or like a study deck. It needs to be a deck I can read for myself with. It needs to be a deck I can, like, I'll usually do at least a couple of readings for my partner, and, you know, theoretically I might end up reading for other people if we meet up with other friends or what have you. So it needs to be versatile, it needs to be functional. But yeah, so this is something, like I say, that I think about quite a lot, and then Marlena's video inspired me to make my own response. And I have a little stack to my left of the decks that I have used as like workhorse type throw in my bag decks before that have kind of served this function for me, although not in those specific words. And then to my right I have a pile of decks that I think might play the role of an everyday carry, and I'm just going to go through them and chat it through with you. So without further ado, I will get into it. This you may recognize, ooh, let's not set that on fire. You may recognize the scarf that it's in, because I feel like I bring this out a lot. And every time I say, look at this pretty scarf. This is the Trippin Waite Tarot. And this is probably the first, once I started regularly taking tarot out and about with me and stopped being shy about pulling it out when I like met up with friends at the pub or whatever, this was probably the first deck that I would grab that would be like a go-to, is what I mean. So I guess this would have been my first everyday carry, although I like I say, I wasn't thinking about it in those terms exactly, but this was the deck that I grabbed and threw in my bag because it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, so it's easy to read. It's got this really fun, vibrant colour palette, so I'm happy to look at it, and it also is a fun take on the Rider-Waite-Smith. Even the scarier cards, like say the Death card, which I don't know, I might have already gone past it, I wasn't paying attention, but like the Tower's under here, and like that's a fun take on the Tower. It's much less scary, and like the scary cards are less scary in this deck is what I'm getting at. And like I say, this is the first deck I really read for other people with, specifically reading for like people like my friends that I know, because it was when I stopped feeling so self-conscious about it. And it's a fun deck, so it's not going to scare people, it's not going to put them off, especially if I do end up like drawing the Death card when we're having just like a fun tarot pull over a pint. Like I don't want to like scare them. So This was my first everyday carry kind of deck. And like I say, it works really well because it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. And for an everyday carry situation, I do want something that I find easy to read. So it doesn't have to be a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but something that is strongly based in the Rider-Waite-Smith system would be a good shout. Because I don't want it to be one I have to think too hard about. I want to be able to just chuck a deck in my bag and go. So that is the Trippin Waite. And like, this would be a contender, but it's too summery. And as for my Tarot Collectibles decks, the other one, like, I do have another one that I don't think I grabbed actually. I do have another one that would kind of serve the same function. It's the Blacklight Tarot, and it's another like groovy but slightly less summery deck. But yeah, this was my first like everyday carry, but I don't think that it's gonna be the one for me for this moment in time because it's very cold and gloomy. We are not in summer yet. The rest are in no particular order, but the Tarot of the Crystal World, this was one that I was infatuated with when I first got it. And I don't know if it's showing up how like bashed up the gilding has become. And I've had this, I think I got it arrived in June of last year, so I've only had it since last summer. But I really enjoy this as an everyday carry because I just like the deck. So I don't know if it's functionally an everyday carry or if it's just one that I was really, really into and really into taking with me everywhere because I was just a bit obsessed with the artwork. But I think it's not quite, I don't know, it's easy to read, but it doesn't quite speak as loudly as some other decks. And for one that I may end up reading for other people with, I don't know if it quite does the trick. I'm not sure, but I do like how the people portrayed are a little bit closer to reality in terms of like diversity. It's more realistic than something like the Rider-Waite-Smith, which is very much not. And that is the reason why the other deck that I have that I do kind of grab as a go-to is the Fifth Spirit, because, I mean, for many reasons, but one of the reasons is the diversity in the deck and the way it just feels more realistic, not realistic, relatable. It feels more relatable. It feels more like a reflection of the real world and the people that I spent time with and am likely to read for on an out and about day. I love this Nine of Pentacles. So this is a contender for what could be my everyday carry, specifically for the next like week or so that I'm away. I want to take a couple decks with me. And this is for sure a contender. I also really like the kind of pippish nature of the minors. I think that makes it a little bit more versatile. Even though I do also really like scenic minors, but I think I kind of view the Rider-Waite-Smith as default because I did all of my learning based on the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, and I can apply all the other meanings that I've developed since I first learned the system. I can apply those onto a Rider-Waite-Smith image, whereas when something deviates from the Rider-Waite-Smith in the minors in particular, I don't know what it is, and I think this is just a mental thing that I need to get over, but if something is very scenic in the minors and it's very, very different to the Rider-Waite-Smith, I kind of have a hard time overlooking that because I feel like I should be reading the deck in front of me. And because this is a bit more pippish in the minors, which now of course aren't showing up, I don't know, it kind of removes that like lens over it. Anyway, that is Fifth Spirit. I really like this. Something I haven't mentioned thus far is like, because I know Marlena talked about this in her video, she wanted a tuck box deck, and I tend to put my decks in bags if they're going in my handbag, so that's not such an issue, but I probably would quite like to keep the guidebook with it. And that's the other thing, this has a chunky guidebook, but I really like Charlie Claire Burgess's writing, so I kind of would want to hold on to it. This also has some spreads which are fun, although less important for an everyday carry. It's just nice to have like some spreads in there and like some spreads to hand. And I feel like I didn't really make my mind up. I feel like this is not a contender for right now for my kind of grab and go deck for the next week. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. It's just not, it's not like clicking for me right here and right now. So, and then the Morgan-Greer is my other routine grab and go deck. I recently edged this really badly. It's extremely patchy, but it matches the backs. And this is a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. Oh, the devil. I love the colours in the Morgan-Greer. This is definitely one that I find easy to read. I find this one is also very versatile into the situations it reads for. I never have trouble using this, no matter what the question is. The answers can be a little blunt, and that's not always what I want or what I think the question or the querent is wanting. But, you know, aside from that, I think this is a really solid contender. Probably I will bring this one with me in a different deck that has a bit of a different tone to it, but we'll see. I'm going to go through the other stack I've got next to me, but I love this. I love the colours. I love the tactile experience of this deck. I enjoy reading with this deck. I really like the way that it is stylized without being at a complete remove from the Rider-Waite-Smith. Does that make sense? Like this and the Trippin Waite, which is a clone, they're both very stylized, but they're both very Rider-Waite-Smith. Whereas a lot of other decks will be very stylized and also kind of their own spin on things, which there's nothing wrong with. I also enjoy that, but I do want something that is kind of a bit of a reliable, I'm used to kind of starting point almost. It feels like a baseline. That's what I'm getting at. The Rider-Waite-Smith feels like a baseline for me because it's the system I learned on. So in terms of like a grab and go, especially in terms of only having one or two decks with me for a whole week, I do want one that kind of is that baseline for me. I'm going to put the Nine of Pentacles on top because I really like the purple. So they were my decks that have been everyday carry type decks for me before. And of those, the Morgan-Greer and the Fifth Spirit are definite contenders for me for at least like the next week. Obviously none of this is set in stone because I'm making up the rules as I go, but I am currently looking for something to see me through the next week or so, and these are definite contenders. I grabbed a bunch of decks and I'm going to look at these two first because, oh no, I'm going to grab these two first because they're both portable. I have a couple more decks that are tiny, but one of them is the Barbara Walker, which like does not feel like an everyday kind of vibe. But I have the little Lifelines Tarot, which serves the purpose of being a Rider-Waite-Smith clone and also being very tiny and portable. So I could have this with something that's a bit more kind of like themed or just a little bit further away from the Rider-Waite-Smith, because I've got what is essentially a Rider-Waite-Smith to come back to or to read with when I just want something kind of basic and straightforward. And I do really like this little deck. It's a really cute little deck. And, you know, it's Rider-Waite-Smith, so it's an easy reader. Then the other mini portable deck I have is the Wild Unknown Pocket Tin Edition, which again comes in its own storage box. I am really tripping over my words this evening. Love Death sitting on top. So I really like this. I like this more than I thought I would. Let's zoom in, shall we? I like this more than I thought I would when I bought it, which does beg the question, Sylvie, why did you buy this? But I have a whole video on that, and B, I thought maybe my tastes in decks didn't have to be quite as limited as I was making them, and it turned out that that was correct. And I like more decks than I thought I would. But anyway, so my point being, I do like this. I like reading with this. I find it surprisingly intuitive given how minimal some of the, especially like the pips, they're definitely not is scenic the word? They're not, like, I'm gonna say narrative pips. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're obviously illustrated. They're more than just like your playing card pips, but there's not a whole lot going on to, you know, there's no people, there's not a whole lot to suggest what the card could mean, but I really like them. And kind of similar to the mini Rider-Waite-Smith visually, like, they're very stripped back, they're quite easy to read with, they don't feel overwhelming to read with. So this, I think, is also a strong contender. And I really do like that it's mini, because I feel like I have so many massive decks, and it's nice that this is just, it's little. The deck and the guidebook fit in the little tin. I love how chunky this guidebook is. I think it's so funny. But yeah, it's all in one, and that's really nice. All right, I also have the Golden Tarot by Cat Black. This edition I have trimmed and edged. This was like a workhorse deck for the longest time for me, and then I think I was very used to it, and new shiny things came along, and then I just kind of put this on the back burner for ages. But I recently pulled this out to do a client reading, because I have an Etsy to do readings on now, but I pulled this out to do my first client reading, which was very cool. And I was like, this deck is fantastic, and there was a reason it was a workhorse deck, and I find it really easy to read with. So this is also a contender for my everyday carry, because I like reading with it. I also think it's fairly inoffensive. And I don't mean inoffensive as in like doesn't offend people. I mean inoffensive as in it's not too in your face in any particular way. I think probably because it's made out of existing artwork, it feels a bit, I can't think the word, but I just feel like it's very palatable, and I think it's hard to have much of a strong feeling against this deck, which is not something I'm super worried about, but is something to consider. Especially, like, it would not be the first time where I've been playing with tarot cards and a small child has run up and said, what are those cards? Like, what game are you playing? And it's, luckily that was, I forget what deck that was, but it was a very PG, safe for work deck. But I don't want that to repeat itself, where I have a deck that has like naked people all over it, or more dark or gruesome imagery, because that's just a little bit awkward. So it's something that I'm aware of, and this deck I think is not, like, I'm not worried about that with this deck. So this is maybe, I like the size, I like this deck, I can read with this deck, so maybe. Right, this is the Raven's Prophecy, and this feels like a bit of an odd choice because this is very themed. It's set in its own world, but something about it, well, I know exactly what about it, because it's set in the world of the Raven Cycle, which is a book series that I am familiar with. I've read several times. I really enjoy. I feel very comfortable with this deck, and this deck feels very familiar, and that is very appealing in an everyday carry situation, something that I am comfortable with, and something that feels familiar because it's something that's going to be on my person pretty often, and in this particular case is going to be the deck that I'm reading with for the next week or so. So that is tempting, but it is also very stylized. I'm thinking this, and maybe like the mini Lifelines, or maybe even this could be a fun pair, because this, I feel like they'd go together aesthetically. So like maybe that's a vibe. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I kind of think that could be interesting to read with this one for a week, and then have another Rider-Waite-Smith based deck like in my metaphorical back pocket as backup. So that's a maybe. Okay, also speaking of decks that feel a little bit too stylized to fit the theme, but I kind of want to try, this is the Woven Path. This is huge, which is one reason why I think it's not the one. Like, obviously I can put it in a little bag, but the deck itself is really chunky. And if I want the guidebook's also really chunky because it has images throughout. The reason I was thinking about gravitating towards this one is because it is such a close Rider-Waite-Smith deck, despite being very themed in its own way. I feel like I could read this one like a Rider-Waite-Smith. I feel like it's close enough to the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just pretty and different imagery. And I also think that because this is not made out of old artwork, like the Golden Tarot I think is late medieval, early Renaissance, and this deck is inspired by medieval tapestries, but is modern artwork that was created for this deck. But because it still has that kind of historical vibe to it, I think also it's quite palatable and is also not one I'm worried about like whipping out at a cafe when there's like children 2 tables over or something. Like that's not something that I would worry about with this deck. Also, I've been neglecting this, so it might be fun to read with it for a week and like really like break it in to my collection. So I don't know though. It depends what other deck I'd bring alongside. This and I wonder if this and the Golden Tarot, did I do this? Yeah, I had a playing with pairs video with this deck in it, and I don't remember if I tried the Golden Tarot, but I didn't find anything I liked. So maybe this and another Rider-Waite-Smith clone, just to have the 2 options. But then they're 2 Rider-Waite-Smithy decks, and I don't think I want... I'm not sure. The Terra Volatile, as we know, is a favourite deck of mine. It has never been a go-to handbag deck. It's never been one that I've grabbed to take with me, I think, ever. And I think it's just, I don't know, I have a relationship with this deck, and I also kind of don't want to read for other people with it because I feel just very possessive about this deck for like no reasonable reason. But I just don't think I want to read for anyone else with it. But I couldn't not grab it while I was talking about the idea of like a everyday carry deck that I find an easy read, because I do find this deck easy to read. I really enjoy reading with this deck. I enjoy shuffling this deck, like the tactile experience of this deck I really like. And I didn't know why I'd never considered this for a everyday carry before, but I have just realised that I think it's because I don't want to read for anyone else with this. This is for me. This is my deck. So yeah, it's unfortunately not a contender for an everyday carry. Right, the Way Home is another deck that I am considering for an everyday carry because it is quite what's the word? The imagery is fairly minimal, and when reading it's quite I can't think of the word. It gets the energy of the card across without giving you a lot of detail, and so it is quite a good like mirror to hold up to do a reading with, which I think a lot of people would refer to tarot as a mirror anyway, so it's really effective in that sense. It has a lot of open space, both visually. There's a lot of like negative space in a lot of these cards. Visually it has a lot of open space, but also if you think about having a conversation with your cards, this leaves a lot of room for your side of the conversation, which I do appreciate. I think it works well for a lot of different readings. I also think this works well for reading for other people because of a lot of that open space, and it doesn't give too specific an image for that other person to like try and take a message from. It can be a little bit more versatile in a reading, so I like that as well. Oh, and that's so pretty. But also this feels like a spring deck. I think I put it in my, like, a year ago now. It's coming up to the spring equinox again soonish, couple months. A month. I don't know, it's not a long time. But when I did my spring decks last year, I think this was in there because of the, like, open space. It feels like spring. So I'm kind of reluctant to use it yet. So yeah, I think this would work well for an everyday carry, but maybe not yet. All right, and then I've got one more, which I think would be a really good everyday carry. I'm just not sure if I know it well enough yet. This is the New Chapter Tarot, which I feel like I spoke about really recently. I think it was in my neglected decks. But anyway, this is mini. Like, the box is one of those annoying massive Llewellyn boxes, but I can put this in a bag really easily. And I like the imagery. Again, it's quite impersonal. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for, is impersonal. Like, it doesn't try and impose itself too much on whatever your situation might be. And I think in that sense, it's quite versatile. But like I say, I don't feel like I know this deck very well yet. But then again, similar to the Woven Path, maybe I just need to, like, break it in for a week and see how we go. And if it's the only deck I've got for a week, then I will have to learn to read it. This also, it has a little guidebook. Why does it need to be hardback? It's a little white book, and the minors are just so, there's not a lot there, but I do quite like some of the, I've done a couple readings with this since I talked about how much I neglected it, and I have actually quite liked the guidebook entries, and like these two together don't take up a lot of space, so I think that would be easy enough as an everyday carry situation. So, oh, decisions. Like, the more I look at this, the more I'm like, yeah, maybe I do want this to be my everyday deck. The Empress is very much giving High Priestess. Do we not think? With the crescent? And the blue? Anyway, like, I think this would be a good one. Like, I kind of do want to grab this as my everyday. Okay. Who do I like? Who do I like? If I were to have this and maybe this in the Morgan-Greer, I think that would be a very functional couple of decks. Actually, I quite like how they look together. Which isn't the point of this video. I'm not, like, trying to find pairs, but they look quite nice together. But, like, I think that would be a very functional pairing. I've got, like, a very straightforward, easy to read, bright and colourful Rider-Waite Smith, and then I've got this, which is not necessarily difficult to read, just I'm not very used to it, so it's not as quick for me. But this also, I think, has some, like, thothy influences, so that would be fun to have, like, a slightly more thothy deck and then a very Rider-Waite Smith. That might be a fun little combination of decks. And then also, I quite liked the idea of the Raven's Prophecy and the Wild Unknown. But then neither of those are a very straightforward Rider-Waite Smith, so unsure. But I think they would make a nice pair of decks to take with me for a week. And I think I need one deck that is much more on the functional side, and then the other deck can be, like, a little bit more fun and interesting and a little bit more niche maybe, which I think this pairing does, because I think I could quite happily read for anyone about anything with the Wild Unknown. I truly don't know how the Wild Unknown turned out to be such a just, like, usable deck in my collection, because for years I was convinced I did not want this deck, and in hindsight I think I was just, like, being a bit of a bitch and being like, I'm not like other girls. I don't want the super popular deck that everybody's in love with. And now I'm like, but it's really good actually. And I kind of also want all of her other decks. But anywho, I think these would work well together. The only other thing about this is that I suppose like, okay, so this is the book, which like I have a little suitcase, so I'm not super tight on space, but like I don't really want to bring this, and also it then limits its usability as like a take out with me on the daily deck, because I don't need the guidebook to read with this, but I quite like to have the guidebook. But I can maybe bring the guidebook with me, but then actually like I like this guidebook, but I don't think I need it. Struggles. So I'm not sure about that. And I do also really like the idea of the woven path, but like who would I could do the woven path and the wild unknown. I could do the woven path and the lifelines. They're both very Rider-Waite Smith is the thing, which, you know, isn't a bad thing, but it feels a little bit redundant to have. I mean, this is the Rider-Waite Smith redrawn, and then this is very Rider-Waite Smith like base. You can see in the images like that's a 9 of coins. You've got the garden, you've got the bird, you've got the house in the background. The 4 of wands is a little bit atypical, I will admit, but like most of the deck is quite consistent with the Rider-Waite Smith. Like that 9 of swords, that's a 9 of swords. 10 of cups is very much a 10 of cups. Like it feels a little bit redundant to have two Rider-Waite Smithy decks. So maybe with the Wild Unknown, which is based on the Rider-Waite Smith, but like I say, is very much its own thing. And I feel like they would serve different purposes, because this is also quite a clear deck, and this, again, just by virtue of not knowing it very well, this is less of a clear deck for me. I'm not sure. Okay, you know what? No, I'm snap deciding. I'm going to take the new chapter. I'm going to take the Morgan-Greer. And I'm also going to take an oracle. And the oracle I'm going to take with me is the Animal Apothecary, which I really enjoy. And since we're getting them all out, I also think it goes with the vibes. Like, I think I would happily pull the Animal Apothecary with either of these. Like, I think it works. So, I think that's my decision made. So my everyday carry for the time being is going to be the New Chapter Tarot, the Animal Apothecary Oracle, and the Morgan-Greer Tarot. So I've got a Rider-Waite Smith, very easy, very clear reader. I've got a more thothy. I need to figure out how thothy this is, how Rider-Waite Smith this is. I think there's a little bit about that in the guidebook. And also this guidebook is not big, so I don't mind taking this. This is never going to actually be in my handbag. I'm just taking this with me to also have an oracle with me for the week. So I'm happy to have this in its little 2-piece box with this guidebook. That's not too much to carry, considering that I will have a little case with me because I'm going up for a whole week. And then I just want a little bag for this one. And I'll probably keep Morgan-Greer in its tuck box. No, because that tuck box is falling apart. Okay, Morgan-Greer is in the rainbow bag. I will find a little something to put the new chapter and book in. But this is small enough that I can shove it in a bag. This I can shove in a bag, taking out and about with me. And yeah, I think they work well together. So that is my little everyday carry. I hope this was interesting. I was definitely just thinking out loud on camera, but I really enjoyed Marlena's video, and I hope that you will have enjoyed this video as well. Do go check out Marlena's video if you haven't already seen it. I thought it was really cool. So I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, I really hope you have enjoyed. Let me know if you have like an everyday carry deck, what that is, Do you change yours up seasonally? Because like I say, this is very much for the next week. It's a bit of an experiment to see how I get on with the new chapter. And if that is not the vibe, then maybe I will change that up. But I think these are definitely good grab and go decks. So yeah, let me know what you think and let me know what your grab and go everyday carry decks are. Give me a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.